She was timid, almost invisible in conversations. Every time she tried to speak, her words stumbled out hesitantly, tangled in pauses and half-finished sentences. Her accent was mocked, her grammar left in shambles, and her confidence shattered each time she dared to express herself. Yet today, that same young woman stands tall, speaking English with grace, clarity, and confidence. Her words now flow with fluency and fire, and her once quiet presence has transformed into a powerful voice that commands attention. This is Jenny's story, raw, real, and deeply inspiring. But more importantly, this is not just Jenny's story. This could be your story too. If you have ever felt small because of language, if you have ever hesitated to speak because you feared being wrong, then let me take you on this journey. You'll see how Jenny turned fear into fluency, and how you can too. Jenny's journey is not a miracle. It is not about natural talent or being gifted with languages. It is about determination, consistent practice, and learning smarter rather than harder. It is a story that proves anyone can rise from broken sentences and shy smiles to confident communication. And as we explore this journey, I want you to reflect on your own path. Imagine where you could be in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, if you took the same steps Jenny took. If Jenny's transformation inspires you, or if you believe in the power of personal growth through language, I ask for just a small gesture, a simple thank you. On platforms like this, you can do that by sending a super thanks. It's not just support for me, but a way of fueling the creation of more stories, lessons, and techniques that empower English learners just like you. Together, we grow one word at a time, one sentence at a time, one story at a time. Now let's step into Jenny's shoes and experience her world. A beginning marked by fear and curiosity. My name is Jenny, she begins softly. I am a student of English literature, and this is my story. It was a radiant summer morning when Jenny found herself on a train, the sunlight spilling through the windows, painting the seats with golden warmth. 2 women sat across from her, speaking effortlessly in English. Their laughter rose and fell with the rhythm of the train. Jenny listened intently, but their words were slippery, like water flowing through her fingers. She was studying English at the time, but she was only a beginner. Her vocabulary was limited, her confidence even more so. Still, something inside her pushed her to try. She leaned forward slightly and said a few simple words in broken English. To her surprise, the women understood. Their smiles softened her fear, and in that moment, Jenny felt the first spark of hope. She told them, in her simple way, that she wanted to learn English. They listened, and they responded with kindness. They told her they were from England, returning home from a conference. The conversation lasted only 10 minutes, but for Jenny, it felt monumental. When her station arrived, she stood up to leave. The women handed her a small piece of paper with their address and phone number, telling her that she could visit them if she ever came to England. Jenny stepped off the train with the paper in her hand and a fire in her heart. That short exchange, those 10 minutes of courage, became a turning point. From that day on, Jenny made English her daily companion. She translated texts, watched films, and repeated words aloud. Day after day, little by little, her English grew stronger. 6 months later, she found herself not just improved, but transformed. Yet still, she hungered for more. She wanted immersion, challenge, and real growth. So she made a bold decision. She would go to London, the heart of the English-speaking world, to study. The classroom that changed everything. When Jenny arrived in London, She enrolled in a language school. Her first class was on a Monday. She entered nervously, clutching her notebook, and found herself in a room with students from around the world. At the front stood her teacher, a young woman with a calm presence and a kind smile. Jenny instantly noticed her humility and warmth. It was clear that this teacher cared about her students. The lesson began with introductions, and then the teacher asked a question. What do you already know about the English language? Jenny and the other students shared what little they could. Then the teacher revealed something that would reshape Jenny's entire approach to learning. You don't need to study English in the traditional way. You don't need to drown yourself in textbooks or memorize endless rules. Instead, you need to use English. Use it in your daily life. Use it to communicate. Use it to express yourself. This idea struck Jenny like lightning. She had always struggled with textbooks, finding them confusing and discouraging. But here was a different method, living the language rather than merely studying it. The teacher explained further. Language exists for one purpose: communication. It is a tool for expressing ideas, emotions, and thoughts. That means the best way to learn is by using it for exactly that purpose: speaking, listening, sharing, expressing. Grammar and vocabulary are important, yes, but they are not meant to be studied in isolation. They are meant to be practiced in context, every single day. Jenny felt liberated. For the first time, learning English no longer seemed like an endless uphill climb. It became something natural, something alive. The class continued with conversations about hobbies and free time activities. Students paired up, speaking in English as much as possible. Jenny found herself laughing, sharing, and learning in ways that no textbook had ever allowed her to. She walked out of that class beaming with excitement, discovering the secret to vocabulary growth. The next day, Jenny returned, eager for more. A student asked a question that intrigued her. What is the best way to learn new words? The teacher smiled knowingly. There are many ways, she said, but research shows the most powerful way is simple: reading. People who read consistently learn words at twice the speed of those who don't. Reading for just 30 minutes a day can change everything. Jenny leaned in, listening carefully, as the teacher explained how to maximize the power of reading. Choose texts that interest you. Never force yourself through dull material. When you enjoy what you read, you learn faster and remember more. Pick books that match your level. Struggling with every sentence leads to frustration. Start with something you can mostly understand and build from there. Look up new words in the moment. Keep a dictionary nearby. When you encounter an unfamiliar word, check it immediately, understand it, and move on. You don't need to memorize or write it down. Your brain will store it naturally as you continue reading. Observe how words connect. Reading doesn't just teach vocabulary, it teaches structure. You see how words link, how sentences flow, and how ideas are built. Jenny loved this method. It was simple, practical, and effective. That evening, she picked up a short English story and started reading. She looked up words as needed, and slowly, she began to feel the rhythm of the language settling inside her, taking English beyond the classroom. But Jenny's journey wasn't limited to school. She wanted to use English everywhere. One of her goals was to find a job in London, both to support herself and to practice speaking with native speakers. During a lesson, she asked her classmates if they knew where she could look. They suggested visiting a job center. Jenny went that very afternoon. Standing at the counter, she asked a question that felt both exciting and terrifying. What is the best job for a student? The lady behind the desk smiled and suggested options: a cleaner or a waitress at a cafe. Jenny hesitated. She had no experience with either, but the woman encouraged her. "Your English is good enough for cafe work. The training is easy, and you'll have more opportunities to practice speaking." Jenny left with her first job offer in London. She was thrilled. Not only would she earn money, but she would practice English daily in real conversations with real people, facing the challenge of pronunciation. By Wednesday, Jenny had grown comfortable in her class, but that day, something caught her attention. A quiet student from South Korea raised his hand and shared his struggle: pronunciation. He explained that he could read and understand English well, but when it came to speaking, his sounds never felt right. He avoided talking because he feared people would notice. The teacher nodded sympathetically and then introduced a technique that would soon become a game changer for Jenny as well: shadowing. Shadowing, she explained, means listening to native speech and repeating it immediately, almost like an echo. Children learn their first language this way, by copying their parents over and over until their pronunciation becomes natural. You can do the same. She showed the class videos demonstrating shadowing and had them all practice for 3 minutes. Jenny felt strange at first, mimicking voices from a screen, but soon she realized how powerful it was. Her mouth moved differently, her tongue shaped sounds in new ways, and for the first time, she began to feel the difference between English sounds and those of her native language. The teacher added, "Shadowing is especially powerful before a presentation. Spend just 10 minutes shadowing before you speak, and your pronunciation will be clearer and more confident." Jenny walked out of that lesson with a brand new tool in her arsenal: finding confidence in community. Later that week, Jenny asked the school receptionist about sports activities. She had always loved sports and wanted to continue in London. To her delight, she learned the school had both a table tennis team and a football team. That evening, she joined football practice. There she met students from Brazil, Japan, Russia, Spain, Argentina, and Italy. The field became a place not only for exercise, but for cultural exchange and friendship. Jenny's confidence blossomed, not just in the classroom, but in every corner of her new life. And the best part? Tomorrow, she would begin her new job at the cafe. It felt as if all the pieces were falling into place. Jenny's story was no longer just about learning English, it was about living it. On Thursday morning, Jenny walked into class to discover someone new sitting in the circle of desks. The teacher introduced her as Elizabeth, a returning student from Italy. There was something immediately striking about Elizabeth. When she spoke, her English was not hesitant or fragmented like most beginners. Her pronunciation was smooth, her sentences confident, and her fluency impressive. Jenny, who was still finding her way with grammar and vocabulary, listened with admiration and a little curiosity. How could someone who had only been in this very same school as a beginner just 1 year ago now speak with such confidence? It seemed almost impossible, yet here was Elizabeth, proving with every word that transformation was possible in less time than most people could imagine. The teacher, too, noticed Elizabeth's growth and praised her openly. "Your English is beautiful," she said warmly. "You must have had excellent training in Italy." But Elizabeth shook her head and smiled. "No school," she replied. "I learned at home. I used the techniques I learned here from you. I read, I shadow, and most importantly, I think in English every day. I think aloud to myself. Those 2 weeks in this classroom gave me direction. They showed me how to practice every day, and that is what made the difference." Jenny felt a surge of curiosity. She had heard of reading, yes, and she had recently discovered shadowing, but thinking aloud was something new. She leaned forward and asked, "What is thinking aloud?" The teacher nodded thoughtfully, as if she had been waiting for that question. Thinking aloud, she began, is one of the most effective techniques for accelerating your English fluency. But it requires strong motivation and courage, because at first it feels strange, even a little crazy. The idea is simple. Instead of only thinking in your native language, you begin to think in English. And not just silently, you say your thoughts out loud. As you walk, as you cook, as you get ready for school, you practice speaking your thoughts in English. It doesn't matter if they're simple or imperfect. What matters is that you train your brain to use English as your natural medium for thinking. Jenny listened with wide eyes. She had never considered the possibility of turning her inner thoughts into spoken English practice. Elizabeth, sensing Jenny's interest, decided to share more of her own experience. "When I first tried this," she explained, "I could only manage very simple sentences. Things like, 'I can speak English,' 'I want to practice more,' 'I feel happy today,' 'I am hungry.' At first, it frustrated me, because in Italian, my thoughts were complex and rich, but in English, they had to be short and simple. I couldn't translate everything perfectly. I had to reduce and simplify. But slowly, those simple thoughts became natural. And then something magical happened. I met a tourist from Australia one day, and without realizing it, I spoke to him freely. My sentences were not advanced, but I communicated without translating in my head. That was when I knew this method was working." The class listened intently, and Jenny felt inspired. She decided right then that she would commit to trying this technique herself. She would speak her thoughts aloud whenever possible, no matter how odd it felt at first. Her teacher smiled, sensing Jenny's determination, and added one more piece of advice. "If you want to truly transform your English, combine all 4 elements every day: reading, listening, thinking, and speaking. Dedicate at least 40 minutes to each, and you will be amazed at your progress." That night, Jenny walked home, replaying the lesson in her mind. She tried to put the thinking aloud method into practice immediately. At first, it felt awkward. As she walked down the street, she whispered softly to herself, "I am walking home. The air is cold. I see the lights. I feel tired, but happy. Tomorrow, I will go to class again." People passing by gave her puzzled looks, but Jenny did not care. She reminded herself of Elizabeth's words. "It feels strange at first, but powerful in the end." She continued talking softly to herself all the way back to her small apartment, feeling a strange new sense of ownership over the English words leaving her mouth. The following morning, Jenny woke up early, ready for her very first day at the cafe. She was nervous but excited. Standing behind the counter, she rehearsed polite greetings in English, practicing in her head and sometimes softly aloud. "Good morning, how can I help you? Would you like coffee or tea? That will be £5, please." Her manager, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, gave her simple instructions and assured her that she would learn quickly. The first customer walked in, a businessman rushing to work. Jenny greeted him nervously, but managed to take his order without trouble. As more customers came, she began to relax. She realized something important. Even though her English was not perfect, people understood her, and that was enough. Every interaction became a small victory. Every thank you she received gave her a burst of confidence. Later that evening, exhausted but exhilarated, Jenny sat down and reflected on how much had changed. Just months ago, She could barely string together a simple sentence. Now, she was working in an English-speaking country, communicating with customers, learning on the job. She realized that fluency was not a distant dream. It was already happening, step by step, one conversation at a time. By the end of her first week, Jenny had already begun weaving together the lessons from her teacher, her classmates, and her job into a system of her own. She read for 30 minutes each morning, choosing stories that fascinated her and taught her new vocabulary naturally. She listened to English podcasts while cooking dinner, letting the rhythm of native speech sink into her ears. She practiced shadowing in front of the mirror, mimicking the intonation and flow of native speakers. And whenever she felt nervous or tired, she reminded herself of Elizabeth's courage with thinking aloud. She whispered her thoughts to herself constantly, when walking to school, when washing dishes, even when brushing her teeth. At first, it felt repetitive, but gradually, it became second nature. It was during this period of growth that Jenny noticed another change, not just in her language, but in her confidence. She began participating more in class discussions, raising her hand to ask questions, volunteering to read aloud, and even correcting herself mid-sentence without embarrassment. The fear that once silenced her was losing its power. She realized that mistakes were not failures, they were stepping stones. Each mistake was proof that she was trying, and each correction was a sign of improvement. One Friday afternoon, the teacher organized a class activity where students had to prepare a short presentation about their hobbies. Jenny felt nervous, but she remembered the shadowing technique. She spent 10 minutes in the hallway beforehand, repeating phrases she had memorized, copying the intonation of her favorite YouTube speaker. When it was her turn, she stood in front of the class, heart pounding, and began speaking about her love for football. To her surprise, the words came smoothly. She made a few errors, but she continued without freezing. When she finished, the class applauded warmly, and the teacher gave her a proud smile. Jenny sat down, glowing with accomplishment. She had faced one of her greatest fears, speaking in front of others, and emerged stronger. That weekend, Jenny joined her football team again for practice, running across the field, passing the ball, and cheering with teammates from around the world. She realized how much her life had changed since that first timid conversation on the train months ago. Now she was surrounded by an international community, living in a city full of energy, and every day she was using English in real situations. Football gave her more than exercise. It gave her friendships, laughter, and yet another opportunity to practice English in a natural, joyful way. As weeks turned into months, Jenny's growth accelerated. Her vocabulary expanded through constant reading. Her listening sharpened through daily exposure to English media. Her pronunciation improved through shadowing, and her fluency blossomed through thinking aloud. She kept a small notebook where she occasionally wrote down reflections, not lists of words, not grammar rules, but short entries about her life in London. Today, I served 30 customers at the cafe. I understood almost everything they said, or I read 2 chapters of my book and learned 5 new words. I will try to use them tomorrow. This habit of recording achievements gave her motivation. On difficult days, she would look back at her earlier entries and see just how far she had come. Jenny's teacher often reminded the class that consistency was the secret ingredient. It is not about doing something big once, she would say. It is about doing small things every day. Jenny took this advice to heart. She did not measure her progress in weeks, but in the little victories she gathered daily. The customer who complimented her English at the cafe, the teammate who laughed with her during football practice, the moment she could follow an entire podcast without pausing to check words. By the end of her second month in London, Jenny realized something profound. Learning English was no longer just a subject she studied. It had become part of who she was. It was not a burden, not a challenge to overcome, but a lifestyle. She thought in English, she worked in English, she played in English, she even dreamed in English sometimes. And with each passing day, the shy girl who once trembled at the thought of speaking was replaced by a confident young woman who saw the world differently because she could now connect with it more deeply. Jenny knew she still had a long journey ahead. Her grammar was not perfect, her vocabulary still limited compared to native speakers, and she sometimes stumbled over words, but she no longer feared those imperfections. She had discovered that fluency was not about perfection. It was about courage, consistency, and connection. And with that realization, she was ready for the next chapter of her journey. Jenny often reflected on how far she had come, remembering the frightened girl on the train who could barely form a sentence, and contrasting her with the woman she had become, confident, expressive, and unafraid to make mistakes. London had not just given her lessons in language, it had given her a community, a sense of belonging, and a belief in herself that went beyond grammar or vocabulary. She had discovered that learning English was not about memorizing endless rules, but about living the language, allowing it to weave into daily life through reading, listening, speaking, and thinking. Every customer she greeted, every teammate she laughed with, every book she devoured became part of her growth. Jenny knew fluency was a journey without a final destination, but she no longer feared the road ahead. Instead, she embraced it with excitement, knowing that with each word spoken and each thought expressed, she was not just learning English, she was shaping her future.